And so my presentation is on patient engagement and cultural competency, which is the human experience. And again, I mentioned before, it's a collaboration between our previous Harlem staff and current Harlem staff. So the purpose is that we as healthcare professionals need to educate ourselves and recognize that our beliefs and attitudes, conscious or unconscious, can have a positive or a negative impact on patient care and compliance, patient experience, self-management, and health outcomes. Learning objectives is if we improve the health outcomes of the elderly Black population, we want to increase empathy, respect and understand the individual's cultural beliefs regarding their health, prevent judgmental behavior directed at patients, prevent disparate care, and maintain patient dignity at all costs. So let's, as healthcare professionals, as a group here, what is it that, what's our cultural beliefs and attitudes that is shared? We value family, I would think, work, integrity, religion and culture, ethnicity, finance, health, fun, recreation, privacy. We value dignity and respect, and we value choices. And the reason why choices is underlined, I'm going to see the difference between us having choices, and patients may not have a choice on certain things. So as healthcare professionals, we want to be viewed as professional, knowledgeable, honest, caring, empathetic, non-judgmental, a problem solver, and we want to be culturally competent. So as patients, are the patients really different from us, do we think? So I would say patients value family, work, character, religious, cultural, ethnicity, finance. They value health, fun and recreation, privacy, dignity and respect, and they value choices. And this is where it's going to be very interesting. So amid the diversity, what do patients have in common? They don't have a choice about the disease. That's where choice becomes limited. Once diagnosed accurately, the disease is non-negotiable. You can't give it back. You can't decide, well, I'll take the cancer for 3 months. If I don't like it, I'll come back and get the flu in another 3 months. It just doesn't happen that way. And in case of chronic condition, the disease and its symptoms may remain with patients for life. Patients may be forced to change their lifestyle and or job as a result of the disease, temporary or permanent loss of control over one's life. And at any point in our lives, we as health professionals may become patients as well, and so the interest in the non-negotiable disease, once accurately diagnosed, that you can't give back, and the only other part of life that you can't give back as well is your family. You could disown them, but you can't get rid of them. They're genetically tied to you, and hence, that's non-negotiable as well, whether you like them or not. So the language of negativity, I've always been interested since I've been at various hospitals over the last 10 years. The language of non-compliant without asking why. Frequent flyers is almost like they're no longer human. What percentage of patients get negative label? 10% of health and hospitals population, 20%, 50%? How many times have you looked in a record and you say patient is non-compliant and you see why? Does it ever say why, or do you have non-compliant, non-compliant, non-compliant? And once you have non-compliant, I would say about 3 times, you're under the health bus, right? Nobody wants to talk to you because it's your problem. And I'm of the firm belief that we have turned non-compliant patients without asking why into, quote, frequent flyers, because now they have to do the responsibility of being in charge of their own health. So does the care lack empathy with negative language, constructive dialogue and information? Is there a genuine interest in individuals, the impact patient's ability to self-manage? And does negative labeling increase healthcare costs? Something to think about. And so negative language can cause potential adverse health outcomes because the engagement now is not as, patient is not as engaged as to someone that you particularly value and have a positive sense about who that person is. It can have repetitive emergency department visits, cause increased readmissions, limit willingness to educate patient, and increase the health burdens for patients. So the ultimate culture, when I refer to it as the human experience of the non-negotiable disease, you can't give it back and it may be present for life. So individual value, we value individuals based on their ethnicity, religion, age, race, gender, education, socioeconomic status, and language. So there's culturally sensitive needs for English-speaking population, non-English-speaking population, and limited English-speaking population. Because if we don't value the individual, you could see where increased disparity, increased mistrust, increased non-adherence, decreased knowledge base, and decreased patient engagement can occur in either population, whether they are English-speaking, non-English-speaking, or partially English-speaking. So if the patient is not valued, then from the physician or the health caregiver perspective, I may be detached from the patient engagement process. I may not be as effective explaining medical issues and medication as well as I should. I may not engage the family. I may unintentionally influence other staff behavior, and I may unintentionally substitute do no harm for harm. So what do we know about the cultural needs of our community that we serve? What do they value? Household decision maker, their feelings about herbal medicine, truth about healthcare trust of healthcare institution. Do we know what's important to the elderly population? Is the decision maker the caregiver? What is the perception reality of the community that you serve? What is required for communication skills? And do we know and understand the historical impact that affects African Americans? So the definition that I found in cultural competencies defined as the ability of providers and organization to effectively deliver healthcare services that meet social, cultural, and linguistic needs of patients. A culturally competent healthcare system can help provide health outcomes, quality of care, and can contribute to the elimination of racial and ethnic disparity. So I was at Kings County back in 2011 up to 2014, and I thought what we learned about these patients, the elderly, I thought it was so important to share with everyone and hear the patients' voices, and I'll tell you why. So in Kings County, the African ancestry is front and center. 93% of the population are from African ancestry. Approximately 65% of the patients are from the Caribbean, 35% are African American. Patients of non-African ancestry are 4% Hispanic, 2% white, and 1% other. Approximately 80 to 90% of African American patients are from North and South Carolina. The top 4 islands are Jamaica, Trinidad, Haiti, and Guyana, and the 3 common languages are English, Creole, and Spanish. So the African, as Dr. Bassett alluded to, the African American migration history from North and South Carolina to New York. And the reason I focused on North and South Carolina is because 90% of the patients in the cohort of patients that was in congestive heart failure, readmission prevention, came from North and South Carolina. We're going to talk about that in a minute. But just 35 years after the Emancipation Proclamation, African American communities had begun to thrive. One community in particular was the city of Wilmington, North Carolina, which thrived economically until the massacre of 1898. And there's a documentary on the Wilmington massacre. Everybody wants to look that up. And by 1900, significant portions of African American population had begun migrating from North and South Carolina to New York to escape the atrocities of the Ku Klux Klan Jim Crow laws. And that went from 1876 to 1965. So Kings County Hospital Congestive Heart Failure Readmission Prevention is an interdisciplinary task force. So there was an interdisciplinary task force, which I chaired, and we had to, we met every morning from 9 to 10, And this is what we were, the commitment that everybody committed to not to be judgmental, not to use the word non-compliant without asking why, improve patient engagement and cultural competency, identify who is African American and who's Afro-Caribbean, and recognize and heighten patient value. And the daily questions that we asked when we were discussing a case, so who's the individual? Not who's the patient, who's the individual? What are the fear factors? What's important to that individual? And where's the individual in the acceptance of the disease? And if we couldn't answer that, then the team would have to go back and find it and talk to the patients. So needless to say, we had a lot of patient conversation. The interdisciplinary team included hospitalists, social workers, dietitian, pharmacist, care and case manager, home care, clerical associate. We had a cardiologist that were a consultant, nurses, and for the patients who are able to ambulate and come into the conference room, they were a part of the conversation as well. And we learned a lot. So, and the readmission CHF patient decreased from 30% back in 2012 to 18.7 in just about less than 2 years. The results of the 30%, that number came from then the King's medical director, and the 18.7 in 2014 came from medical and professional affairs. So how do we do it? So I think it's important to hear the patients' voices. They are not in our history books, they are in our beds, and here are their stories. So I went in to speak to a patient, at 10 o'clock in the morning, and I said, where are you from? Like I said, we need to know where you're from so we understand your belief system, if possible. And this is what the story she said. She said, 93 years old, African-American female, originally from South Carolina, who had 7 brothers. Family were sharecroppers. She stated, my family picked cotton on a plantation that was not ours. She also stated, I had to be in the field by sunup. My family picked 400 to 500 pounds of cotton a day and I had to walk 10 miles to a segregated school. I questioned, how do you walk 10 miles, We can't even walk 5 blocks without calling an Uber, and, next thing you know, So then she said, and I would never forget the look on her face, she said, well, if you wanted an education, you had to. It's almost like, what part of this don't you get, stupid? If you wanted an education. She completed primary, junior, or high school. She attended Voorhees College. I had to look up the college. It's a 2-year black college in South Carolina, and she said, I didn't get until the 2nd semester. She was very upset about that. And came to New York in 1942, age 24 to 26, married in 1948, had 2 children. Interesting, her 2 children were 2 of 5 black children to integrate Stuyvesant High School. And everybody know Stuyvesant High School? Okay. I was blown away. Her son graduated from Columbia University as a mechanical engineer, and the second son graduated from Stanford as an electrical engineer. And she attended City College. When she came to New York, graduated as a dietitian, later became a registered nutritionist, worked at Methodist Hospital, and retired in 1980. The salary at retirement was $200 per week, and she said in this really eloquent way, but others made more. Read between the lines. Religion is Baptist, and are you sitting down? This patient is legally blind. Could you imagine? 83-year-old Guyanese patient who said her parents were slaves. I said, tell me more. She said her dad was on the tobacco plantation and her mom on the sugar plantation. So the plantation was a matter of where the slave ships landed is what we end up picking or what we did as a people. 92-year-old Trinidadian female who states, I want to go home. Laying in this bed makes me lazy. I'm used to moving and doing things. Can you get me out of this bed, please? And 84-year Guyanese female, when the nurse brought her 4 medications and offered her water to take her meds, she said, I don't want your water. I have to eat, then take 1 pill, eat again, and then take the rest in the same way. By the way, is there Lasix in the cup? I don't want it. I was in the bathroom 12 times yesterday. 84-year-old African-American female, initially from South Carolina, said, my parents were a step away from slavery and my grandparents were slaves. Humbling. 82-year-old African American who stated on a weekday that what I'm most concerned about is that I'm not able to go to church on Sunday. If you saw the look on this lady's face, she was totally consumed by not being able to please God. So rather than get psych in to do depression screening, why don't you call the minister? So if the minister came in and said, Sister so-and-so, shall we pray? She's going to say no. And so we spoke to the minister and he said, tell her that, we really want her to be healthy and for her to be still participate, because if she wants to go to church on Sunday, that would be helpful, and, to please God. And he told her, even if she is not able to go on Sunday, he will come back in and have a conversation and go pray. Because I don't know if anybody in this room, my assumption, and I don't have any medical literature to prove it, but I don't think there are 5 black women in that age group across the world that's an atheist. Okay? And so the role of religion in this population is really heightened, and it's a part of who they are. 84-year-old Jamaican with heart failure brought in the hospital by her children and grandchildren because she refused to take her medication. When asked, why did she not take her medication? Again, we gotta ask why. She stated, all the medications makes me confused. I'm in the bathroom all day long with the water pill, and I can't eat a morsel of anything I like. So what is the point? Her statement echoes the importance of quality of life. Okay, so even when you're that age, quality of life is important. And we were able to get the team to come in and meet with her to go over a medication. Is there some of the medication that we could combine, or some of the medication that we could take away? And 78-year-old African-American female, initially from South Carolina, was dissatisfied at her hospital experience, and she said, I picked cotton in the South and I paid my dues. I don't deserve to be treated this way, okay? So if you look at the references and what's culturally competent, if we are not a part of the cultural competence discussion, because in this world, cultural competence seems to be related to to language. The English-speaking population is a part of this cultural competency big time. And I'm almost done. So this was very interesting. 94-year-old patient was from Mississippi. Like I said, 90% of our patients was from North or South Carolina. I said, Mississippi, you're throwing my metrics off. You're supposed to be in Colorado somewhere. And he said to me, when did you come to New York? 1940s. What type of work did you do? He said, I was a Pullman porter on the train and my name was Joe. Joe do this and Joe do that. It was humbling. I told him, thank you for being who you are. I said to him, your name isn't Joe, right? So I told him, thank you for being who you are. If it weren't for individuals like you, I would not be here. How can I help you? And if you want to learn about the Pullman porters, you could read about them. Very interesting. And so this was a very interesting, sort of fun patient, 89-year-old Jamaican with diagnosis of dementia. When asked where was she said she was at Brookdale Hospital. I said, you're at Kings County. She said, oh yes, I'm figuring in this world, and this is just my own bias, on a cultural competency during the Obama era, and if you're black and you say, who's the president, and you don't know, there may be some cultural issue, some cognitive issues here. So she said, who's the president of the United States? She says, he has a very funny name, and I won't remember, but he has a very lovely wife. She's always with the older daughter, and he's with the younger one. I said his name, which is true. So there is some connection between her and world. So I said his name is Barack Obama. She said, yes, but I won't remember his name, but I know he's African American. I thought that was funny. So if we acknowledge our patients' history, we would know that some of our patients may have been part of a civil rights movement. Some of our patients may have suffered a level of atrocity more than we could ever imagine. Recognition that access to care for some of the elderly black patients had nothing to do with simply getting an appointment. History prevented them from getting care. And trust of the healthcare system is still a matter of concern for some, not all. And I think there has to be bidirectional cultural competency from foreign medical graduates to American patients to foreign-born patients, and American physicians to American patients who are culturally different from themselves. Foreign-born physicians may have different belief systems, cultural norms, and social values from Americans. Americans and foreign-born physicians need to understand the role of race, gender, age plays in the delivery of healthcare. And the question is, does cultural competence in current day environment addresses any of these issues? Injustice, mistrust, racism. The right to vote, which is only 52 years ago, which is a drop in the historical bucket, and the Tuskegee study. So what have we learned? Behavioral change starts with health professionals. Professionals and patients share the same human concerns and emotions. We can be patients at any point in time, and illness trumps race, gender, and culture. Historical baggage can influence patients' behavior, fear, and trust. And terms such as frequent flyer, non-compliant without why used over time in a healthcare setting towards patients can potentially create a culture of callous disregard. A culture of callous disregard can negatively impact patient health and safety and thus affect patient compliance. That we all can be patients, as stated before, and the elderly, and specifically the black elderly, matters, and the patient engagement for this population is key. So in closing, just some statements. Difficult patients are not just born. They are in part created by their passage through the medical system. Not only has the system failed to cure, it may have done unpleasant things to make matters worse. This came from a hematologist in a paper he wrote in 2001. It's more important to know the person who has the disease than the disease who has the person. Could you imagine? Hippocrates, when thousands of years ago, knew that, and we're just learning that now. It's fascinating. And just a story. During a patient's 2 weeks follow-up appointment with his cardiologist, he informed me, his doctor, that he was having trouble with one of his medication. Which one, I asked? The patch. The nurse told me to put on a new one every day. Put on a new one every 6 hours, and now I'm running out of places to put it. I had him quickly undressed and discovered what I hoped I wouldn't see. Yes, the man had over 50 patches on his body. Now the instructions include remove the old patch before putting a new one. So just since we're talking communication, current African American history, we can improve our communication with our patients and each other. It may help to know that Henry Sampson Jr. invented the gamma cells for mobile phones and wireless communication. The first African American PhD nuclear engineer in the United States, and communication has power. Thank you.